Hi, he's Mattyman.
And he's Vannyboy. And you're listening to The Rusty Playground, a Gen-X-centric podcast centered around all things Gen X. And tonight is a special episode.
A very special episode. Mattyman and I will be talking about Mystery Science Theater 3000, the perfect representation of Gen X humor. It was made for us, much like MTV, only years later and better, in my opinion. It holds a very dear spot in the hearts of Mattyman and myself because we bonded very romantically over.
Yes. Well, significantly. Let's leave it at that.
Yes, significantly. There was beer involved, and I don't remember everything. I woke up with the red shanker. But I'm not going to say about it.
Yes, bonding.
Yeah. And in this episode, we're going to tell you everything we know about it, everything we remember about it, everything we loved about it.
I'm actually experiencing it again, going through the episodes consecutively, because there's a lot I missed.
Yes, there were a lot. So I will start off saying here how Maddie and I went to Virginia Commonwealth University together. And during that time, we would get together and watch these episodes that I had a then girlfriend record on VHS tapes. And
not Betamax.
Not Betamax. What am I, freaking millionaire? Come on.
Yeah.
It was on Comedy Central. We'll get to that. But she basically, I had all the tapes lined up for her. It would come on 3 episodes at a time, 2 hours a piece. She'd put in a 6-hour tape, hit record, and let it go, and then just have to come back and change it out whenever it needed to happen. And then I would take those, and I would watch them over and over again, and I would watch them with Maddie. We'd get some beers, watch it, have some good times, talk about it.
Walk over to the 7-Eleven and get some like horrendous nachos. I was part of the equation. Had to have been.
Yes, at 20 to 24, those nachos were yummy and delicious. At 54, I would be in the hospital 3 days at a time, and they wouldn't even want me there.
Yeah, they'd have to pump your stomach for sure. But that's not, what we're here for.
No, we don't. You don't need to know about the doctors that would be saying, "Sir, get out of our hospital. We do not care about you, and you are very gross. You're too gross for the hospital."
Yeah.
So
we have people with real problems here. Get out.
So we would watch these for hours and hours on end, and also I'm an illustrator, so as I would do my schoolwork, which was painting and drawing and stuff, I would have those in the background, and I would watch them over and over and over again. And I had my favorites, and I had some that I would skip, but I believe that I've seen all of them, and it is without a shadow of a doubt my favorite television show of all time. And part of that is because of the bonding that Maddie and I did through the years that we watched this together. And it has continued outside of VCU for the past, 25 years, 30 years, whatever it is.
Yeah, somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there.
Somewhere in there. In the 90s, and now today we're still watching this show. So
yes, I still watch the ones that we're going to be focusing on here. They did have a reboot on Netflix that had 2 seasons, which were actually quite funny. It wasn't exactly the same because, times change and sensibilities change and stuff, but I felt like they did a really good job. All right, so let's start out with what is Mystery Science Theater 3000. It was a television show that ran from 1988 to 1999, and it started out on a UHF station in Minnesota, St. Paul area, and was bought by the Comedy Channel, which became Comedy Central. And then it was canceled, not because of ratings or anything. They had very strong ratings. They were canceled because Comedy Central decided to change its direction and got a bunch of cussing cartoons and replaced them with it. So the fan base, known as Misties, made a snoot and even put out a large ad in like the New York Times or whatever, one of those, and said, bring it back. And so the Sci-Fi channel, which seemed like a pretty natural fit, they ended up making a deal with them, purchasing the rights, and they had 3 more years there until they decided to go ahead and move on with their lives. Also, I think it had strong numbers. It's just they wanted to go and do something different at that point. 10 years seemed like a good round number to end things, I guess. So
yes. Yes, that's the one of many times Sci-Fi would decide to change directions.
Yes.
Not including when they changed their spelling of their channel, which,
Yeah,
come on.
it's a hip 90s thing to do, Maddie. Come on, man. You know how the kids are today.
Yes.
And by today, I mean 20 years ago.
Yep. Yeah. It's like, we're going to have to be like, what was it? Poochie from The Simpsons?
Yes. Either Pooch, when Poochie's on screen, everybody's got to notice him. And when Poochie's not there, everyone has to ask, where's Poochie, or be talking about him.
Yes. But he was the new, the attitude, the ratitude, whatever. That's what people are doing.
Yes.
You got to make everything extreme.
Hey, what can Gen X say about that, man? Everything we did was extreme. That was our hook, right? We had the X Games came out because of the games that our generation were coming up with, which were basically reckless and irresponsible games that were played in the streets and on stupid snowbanks that were death traps, and we did it.
Mm-hmm.
We had our version of like Candid Camera was Jackass,
Yeah.
right? So yeah, the last real impact that Gen X had on music was, of course, grunge. More music came out after that, but I mean that was like the last great movement in music, in rock music anyway. And that's pretty extreme stuff, so we're okay with it.
Yes.
we Gen X, it's right there in the freaking name, man.
Yeah, it is in the name. It's pretty shameless, really.
That's right.
Because everything was extreme flavor this and extreme flavor that, if you recall.
Yeah, extreme apple.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
We had Xena with an X, right? So
yeah, I guess.
You don't remember Xena?
Yes. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Lucy Lawless.
Yes. I know now.
She was kind of purdy.
I thought you were talking about Zima. I'm like, I don't think that's right.
Zima. We don't claim that.
Zima.
Even if it was made by John R. Gen X, I still don't claim it as being anything to do with us. It's Zima.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but anyway, we've digressed.
We digressed again. So Mystery Science Theater, like I said, it was a show. It's a comedy, and it's everything from poop jokes to holy cow, that's brilliant. Everything in between. Basically, the premise is, and I'm sure most everybody has at least seen either the logo of Mystery Science Theater 3000 or they've seen the silhouettes. It's the TV show where you see what looks like a guy and two robots sitting in the seats in front of you in a movie theater, and they are sitting there making fun of bad movies that they watch.
Yes. Now, answer this. What is the significance of mystery and then science and theater in 3000? How is that all put together? Was there any explanation?
Well,
because in true Gen X fashion, I have researched none of this.
Well, in true Gen X fashion, I watched too much damn television. So through the years, I have soaked up lots of totally useless information that would only work in the future when I was in my 50s doing a podcast with a buddy from college. So it just so happened to like fit right in that nook.
Oh, good. You were preparing.
I was preparing. I didn't even know it. I just thought I was getting drunk. So Mystery Science Theater 3000, the name is basically just cool, right? PBS had Mystery Theater, and they wanted it to be cooler than that. So it's Mystery Science Theater. And the 3000 part, everyone thinks, because in the theme song, which we will go over, it mentions in the not too distant future, but that would be in the year 3000. But it's not the year 3000. It's the 3000th experiment that the doctors, the evil scientists they're the antagonists, and they've done 2,999 other experiments trying to reach their goal of taking over the world. So this whole show is the 3000th experiment that they've done.
And then every week they also number that as
experiment number. Yeah. They don't do episode numbers. They do experiment numbers. So if it's like season 2, episode 10, it would be experiment 210. So that's how they did it, which I always thought was pretty clever. So basically, the origin and history of this was that there's a comedian by the name of Joel Hodgson, who is a very talented, super creative guy who is from the Minneapolis, St. Paul area of Minnesota. And he was like their biggest celebrity star for comedy because he had been on David Letterman and all that kind of stuff. So
he was on SNL for that
SNL
matter
as well. Yep, right. You can go look those up on YouTube, and that was a really big deal for the local comedians. I mean, he's like superstar, right? Been on Letterman and Saturday Night Live. So when he came back to Minnesota, a guy by the name of Jim Mallon, who was the program director at KTMA.
KTMA, yes.
Okay, which is the UHF station there. He was looking for original content to put on his UHF station. And so he asked Joel, hey, do you have any ideas? And Joel, being Joel, was like, well, I mean, what do you have I can work with? And Jim's like, well, we have a lot of pretty shitty movies. Anything you can do with that? So Joel just came up with the idea on the spot. He said it was like just a bolt of lightning. He didn't even know where it came from, but he sat down and wrote down the idea, which is laid out in the theme song that Maddie and I will kind of fumble through here, but I'm just doing off the top of my head. In the not too distant future, next Sunday AD, there was a guy named Joel, not much different than you or me. He worked at Gizmonic Institute, just another face in a red jumpsuit. He did a good job cleaning up the place, but his bosses didn't like him, so they shot him into space.
Send them cheesy movies, the worst we can find.
La la la.
They'll have to sit and watch them all, and we'll monitor his mind.
La la la.
Now, keep in mind, Joel can't control where the movie begins or ends.
La la la.
Because he used those special parts to make his robot friends.
Robot, roll call, Cambot, Gypsy,
Tom Servo,
Crow. If you're wondering how he eats and breathes and other science facts, repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just relax.
Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Wow, 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 wow. And so that's what he did. That was the basis of the show. And he's like, so when do I start? And Jim's like, well, how about tomorrow? So Joel went home that night and just gathered a bunch of stuff. Now, he was a prop comic.
Yes, but let's make sure people understand, not like the crappy, shitty prop comics. This wasn't like he's got a box of shit up there and he's just like holding it up and going, holy mackerel or something.
Right.
Right. Fish back in the
Holy macaroni. He's holding macaroni. No, Joel is an inventor. So he will take crazy stuff and he'll put it together in his comedy routine. Like, for example, and they added these to the show, and I'm sure we'll touch on that later, but basically the kind of comic he would be is, instead of airbags for cars, he would created a helmet for motorcyclists that would turn into an airbag. So if you wreck suddenly and then he pushes a button, the helmet opens up and a big balloon pops up. So he was creative. He wasn't just, making word puns with things that he found. Very creative guy. So He went into his workshop or his house or whatever and just gathered things together and made what he would call the bots, which were actually, obviously puppets. Crow T Robot, as we mentioned before, was comprised of lacrosse mask, was like the back, the netting of lacrosse helmet was like the back of his head. He had, I don't know what his eye area was, but his mouth is famously a bowling pin that they cut in half, and he just put some elements on it that let it go up and down. And later he made Tom Servo, which I'm sure everyone has seen this guy. He looks like he's a gumball machine is what he actually is.
Yep, with little slinky kind of arms.
Yeah, little slinky kind of arms. And I think his chest is a plastic version of fire hydrants. Yes. His body's a fire hydrant, and his face area, whatever, is a gumball machine, and he has like slinkies with little doll hands on the ends of them. Initially,
his mouth to me seems almost like a beak.
It looks like a beak, but it's actually from the gumball machine where you would...
Yeah, where it like spits the gumball out for you.
Yeah. And those were the extra characters, and they were to be controlled and voiced by the comedians that were working on the show. Crow T Robot was controlled by a man named Trace Ballou, also a brilliant person. And all of these guys basically did double duty. So Trace also plays the antagonist by the name of Dr. Clayton Forrester. And at the time, they had a man named Josh Elvis Weinstein, or is it Elvis J. Weinstein? Josh Elvis Weinstein.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And also a very funny guy. I think the KTMA version was basically a toaster, and it didn't have enough personality for him, so they created Tom Servo, and he was the original voice of Tom Servo. And he eventually left, I think, the second season, and was replaced by another writer for the show who also helped build sets and stuff by the name of Kevin Murphy. And he is Tom Servo and will always be Tom Servo.
Yes,
let's face it.
Because of course by then, you know, Tom Servo, he sings a lot.
Yes.
Yeah, Kevin Murphy's got an amazing voice.
Yes, he has a great voice. And so for a long time, Kevin Murphy said that when he first was revealed they never said like, hey, a new voice from again, repeat yourself. It's just a show. I should really just relax. And he was doing the voice of them, and he started getting they started getting like hate messages left on their answering machine. And one guy used his dot matrix
on their CompuServe bulletin board.
Yeah. And printed
whatever
out,
it may have been.
Yeah. I hate Tom Servo's new voice, and actually
it took 10 minutes to print that on his dot matrix. But.
Yeah, I assume that Kevin Murphy still has that. He was very proud of that. He had it up in his office, and that was for that reason. He's like, this must have taken $30 and like an hour and a half of this thing just to do it and then mail it to him. So it was a real committed hate. And he appreciated that.
Yep, kids, you had to have some effort there. You couldn't have lazy hatred like you got now.
I know. Yeah, anybody can just go on the Twitters and the Facebookses and the LinkedIn and write all of their stuff out about how they hate blah blah blah.
But man. Yeah. If you were trolling back then, you know, at least 30 minutes was put into it.
At least 30 minutes. And then you had to mail it.
Yeah.
Not like push email, like actual go to post office and send your hate through the U.S. Post Office. So it would end up in the guy's office, and he would put it up on his wall and remember you lovingly for the rest of his life.
Yep.
So
he singled you out.
Yeah, that's right. So that was the gist of what is Mystery Science Theater. And I kind of touched on the origin a bit. So as we'd stated before, it ran on 3 different networks, if you want to count the UHF station as a network. But basically, in its first run, and that's mainly what we're talking about here, because this is what we had when we were, you know, growing up in college and stuff.
We're being all Gen X-y right here.
Yes. They had 2 hosts, of course. Joel Hodgson, who was the creator, who I had mentioned before. His character was Joel Robinson, and Robinson named after Swiss Family Robinson. And
was it that or Space Family Robinson?
He said it was Swiss Family Robinson.
Okay, so I'll take him at his word. Yeah,
that's what he said in the book. So I guess he would know. And so Joel, he was the personality that he was given, basically, and it made sense since he was the creator of all of this. He was the father of Crow and Tom. So, like, you know, when they would have little skits between the movies and stuff, they would treat him like a dad and ask him questions, and he'd put them to bed in their little, you know, sleepy clothes and that sort of thing. Joel, tell us about the old days of the 1960s, you know, and he'd tell them stories and stuff. So he was like a father figure there. And then later, Joel left, as we'll get into here in a bit, and Michael J. Nelson, who was the head writer, he likes to say that he was the head writer because he was the fastest typer. And I think some of that might come from his own humility. He's a humble guy. But you know, he's definitely funny. He's a funny writer. But once Joel left, Mike took over, and the personality that he was given was more of like the big brother or the you know, the older friend, I guess. They would kind of rip on him a little bit. Yeah. Joel was never the butt of the bots' jokes. They usually just kind of picked on each other. But with Mike, they would kind of pick on him some. And it was it added a new dynamic, which I think was smart, because if they had, you know, if Mike had taken over and he tried to be Joel part deux, it wouldn't have worked at all. Yeah. Maybe in a way it could almost be like a stepdad, in that you're not my dad. Right. You can't tell me what to do. This show was very meta, very aware that it was, you know, not real. Right. They weren't trying to sell it like, oh, this is a real thing that's happening to us. You'd have like on one of the episodes there, it's like Attack of the Moon Creatures or something. They're watching the guys fly through space, and in space you see a moon that looks like it's all wrinkled up and looks very similar to the logo for Mystery Science Theater. And Tom Servo goes, "Hey, it's the MST3k logo," and Joel's like, "Shh, you're not supposed to know about that," that kind of thing. Much like Kirk versus Picard, Misties are like Joel, or David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar. Who do you like better? Joel versus Mike. That was kind of what people would say. Me, I love them both for what they were, just like I loved David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar.
Well, I think some of this comes down to, as time goes on, you can just get an appreciation of an era and realize that that particular era offered you something that the other one gave you something different.
True.
And so you just appreciate all eras. Whereas when you're in the thick of it, you're closer to the change, and people were, I think, reacted more at that time.
Right. Yeah. I felt like it was similar to it was less like Kirk versus Picard because those two characters were decades apart, right? But it's more like David Lee Roth versus Sammy Hagar, whereas one is a little more out there and the setting the tone originally, and then the other guy is more talented in probably more broad way with people. So Joel's comedy was probably a little more niche for people. So not everybody, not as many people would watch the stuff that was starring Joel, that was guided by his personality, as they would Mike, who I think his humor and his guidance on that show was probably more palatable for general population, if that makes any sense.
I think I'm getting you. I think Mike was more of an everyman.
Yeah.
By then.
Yes.
More relatable to more people.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that Joel's very inventive and much more of an artist, creative kind of person. And that doesn't jive with everybody. Not everybody gets that. They're like, this is kind of weird.
Yeah.
They used.
Yeah. He's more likely the one that would have the black turtleneck and the beret on at one point, drinking intense amounts of coffee.
Yes. Joel had the writing style under Joel was more referential to like Gen X growing up, things that we still experienced and saw, from TV shows to movies to commercials or whatever, that had gone through like the later end of the 60s and even early 60s, like Andy Griffith and stuff like that. I Love Lucy and things. They would have references to those kind of things, commercials and whatnot, like little Alka-Seltzer guy that skated or whatever. I can't remember his name, but we all knew who these things were all the way through the 70s and the 80s. They made a lot of references to pop culture and that sort of thing.
Yeah. Well, he was, because Joel was actually, he was like in the like late boomer generation. So he's bringing some of that in, but being a late boomer, you already have a different sensibility than the early boomers.
Right.
Which is kind of what started shaping Gen X kids.
Yes. Joel was less.
It's kind of a good bridge between the two.
Yeah. Joel, I don't know how old Joel is.
9 years older than us. He's born in 1960.
Wow, I didn't realize he was that much older, and it makes sense because it comes across that way with the things that.
Well, that's why I say he's like that perfect gateway of, he can bring in some of the 50s, like kind of like critique of that time period, which makes it kind of familiar for us because we were still seeing some old TV reruns of the I Love Lucy's and whatnots.
Right.
Yeah. Even into the early 70s, we were watching reruns of that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think so we could get some of the references from that era, but he was also at the end of it. So he was thinking about more 60s references as well.
Yeah. I mean,
60s TV, like mid 60s, Dragnet, things of that nature.
Things like there's a skit where I should preface this with the movies that they watched. The show itself was 2 hours long with commercials. And so sometimes the movies were, an hour and 30 minutes long, and they would have basically 20 minutes of skits that they could make. Sometimes, the movies were only an hour long. And so they'd have some shorts that you would see, which were usually the most popular, little 10-minute educational videos or whatever that they put out that, we as kids in elementary school or junior high would have seen in health class or whatever, that are just kind of like, oh, do I have to watch this stupid thing? But when you watch it with them, man, they're funny.
Yeah. Well, the ones he was showing were ones that were like before our time, but were similar enough to the ones we saw that were like, yeah, it's the same dry, mundane chore. I don't know.
Down on the farm, and it'd be like a 10-minute, 12-minute long story about these cousins that visit their cousins in the summer on the farm, and they're from the city, and this is what it's like. This is where the milk comes from. This is where the cows crap. We're going to the rodeo, that kind of thing. And God, they're funny, and they're just short little nuggets that they can put lots of stuff into. With less breathing room,
and definitely to fill the void, because some of those crappy B movies were not very long. They were maybe like 70 minutes. So right. You got to do something.
You got to do something to fill it out. And they had skits until they went to the Sci-Fi channel. There was no like continuing story.
Yeah, there was no overarching. Yeah,
nothing like
story
that.
Arc.
Yes. So each episode would have its own little universe that it was in, like, Crow found these shoes, and then they might mention it later, but it was nothing that was important. And at one point there, and they also often had songs too that I think Mike and Kevin had a lot to do with. But they asked Joel, they're like, so what was it like growing up in the 60s? And he started telling them, and he's like, well, people smoked, even on the news they would smoke and drink, and you'd have TV shows where some of the characters had crippling alcoholism, and everyone would laugh at them, and that kind of stuff. Yeah. And I just loved it all. I loved everything about this show, from the art direction to the acting, to the writing, literally the show, even as it went into, it won a Peabody Award and was already pretty famous and was being referenced in other TV shows and stuff at the time. They had still a sense of being from Joel's basement or his workbench or whatever. If you looked at the background, you'd see like little, that's like a little dinosaur toy that they've cut in half and have one side on that side. But it's really just supposed to be like textures in the background. But it was just all this found stuff that they put together to make up the walls, and found items that they had. They would just put a plastic mold of them and, make 100 of them and cut them into pieces and put them in the back. And it was quite clever. It was all creative. And I loved that. And so I was saying Joel had that kind of loosey-goosey, more creative mid-60s through the 70s mentality. Whereas when Mike came on as the main host, the humor changed a little bit. So it was more self-referential to the movies they were watching. They still had some of the cultural references, or, plenty of the cultural references, but it was more references to the movie that you're watching right now, or references to other movies that they've already seen. It was just
some of the references got to be more 70s, 80s.
Yes. And they would carry through as well. There were catchphrases and stuff that the Misties caught on to. Like, would you like to tell them about the one from Ega?
Oh, watch out for snakes.
Yes. Basically, these people, this Cabbage Patch faced guy who's the star.
Archie Hall's Jr.
Yeah, Archie Hall Jr., whose dad, Archie Hall, made the movie literally as a vehicle for his son's burgeoning acting career. And of course, they went out and got the absolute smoking hottest chick they could find, and that's the girlfriend for Archie Hall Jr., who actually turned out to be a pretty cool guy. He took it all in stride, and I think he does like conventions and stuff he'll go to. And
but he looks more like a Chucky doll.
Yes.
Kind of face.
Yeah, like very strange face. Yeah, very strange. It's like close inset, super bright blue eyes and kind of puffy cheeks. And it doesn't help that he has like that kind of mid-60s greased hair that's not quite a pompadour, but anyway. So they were in this they were out in the desert, and they were going to look for Ega to find out what this thing that attacked them that night before. And the dad was like, well, you guys are going to go up in the mountains, just go ahead and go searching. And then they start to walk off, and as they start to walk off the screen or out of the scene, you hear in a totally different voice, totally different tone, watch out for snakes. I mean, clearly they put it in post, And why?
It's nothing. It's just distracting.
It adds nothing to it. And, that's kind of a hallmark that's the difference between a so bad that it's good movie and someone who's trying to make a so bad that it's good movie. There's just things that you would never think about to add to make your already bad movie entertaining. Watch out for snakes. I mean, what does that even mean? Why are they doing it? It has no relevance.
But it's an awesome catchphrase.
And they use it all the time. So whenever you'd see in another film, for example, if someone would start to walk out into a field or walk into the woods, one of the comedians would be like, "Watch out for snakes." It just carried through. They had several, Hakiba. They had several things like that that carried through. I killed that fat barkeep. That was another one. They had little things that people would.
What was another one?
McLeod. Yeah, that was. I'm pretty sure that was a Michael J. Nelson special. He's mentioned that before, that he was a big fan of the detective TV show McLeod. And so they would occasionally do a skit while they're watching the movie, and the guy will be walking through the woods and he'll be yelling, "Linda, Linda," looking for Linda. And then Joel or Mike in the bots, or Joel in the bots would, be like, "Linda, Frank, Columbo, boss," or, "Chief McLeod." That was, they would do that over and over again. It's pretty funny. And, some of those jokes became comfortable, right? You had plenty of new stuff every episode. I think I'd read somewhere they'd written something like 700 jokes per episode. And not all of those jokes got in, but that's how many they wrote on average. There were ones, were some that they would use over and over again, and it would just kind of become, a comfortable little catchphrase. Okay, well, that seems to be a good place to split this overly long talk on our favorite show, Mystery Science Theater 3000. So we'll close it out here and look for part 2 that will be released on the same day. And we'll talk to you then.
Yep, we're going to have 2 parts, everyone. Peace out.